Good morning. Today's Wednesday. Today I woke up. I said I'm going to be happy. I don't care what's going on around me. I'm going to embrace the notion of happiness today. And I would like everyone that's following me on social media to do the same. Forgive that person that hurt you the most. Let that pain go. Take the initiative on your business. If you have to change something like stop smoking or anything of that nature, do it. Today's the day. Don't wait for tomorrow. Do it today. All right? Yay! Happy Wednesday!
She was loving. You could call Jennifer at 4 o'clock in the morning. She'll be able to help you. She was strong, just like her mother. And even when she was going through that hard time, she would still be able to find a reason to laugh.
Jennifer Bellony, seen in this photo, and her teenage daughter were the victims of Wednesday's horrific crime in North Lauderdale.
2-year-old Jennifer Bellony is described by family and friends as a positive and beautiful soul who had a love for children. She was known for her contagious laugh and welcoming spirit. Jennifer was also an entrepreneur, owning her own tax preparation services business called Bellony Financial Solutions. She was an amazing mom to her 15-year-old daughter, whom she absolutely adored, and her two.
A young woman was living her normal life. She was a mother. She had family. She had a home. Then one day, her life ended inside her own apartment. Police arrived. The door was closed. Inside, they found Jennifer Bellony. What really happened in that home? Who was the last person with her? And why did the danger come from someone she already knew? What happens when danger is inside the home? Can warning signs be seen before a crime happens? Did anyone notice the signs before it was too late? I was told that this channel won't get to 1K subscribers, but with your love and support it will surely, I pray for you all. God bless you all. Before we begin, if stories the media ignore deserve justice, then subscribe to Unseen Crime Dossiers right now. Like this video so more people can see the truth, and comment below if you believe these voices deserve to be heard. Share this story because awareness can change everything. Welcome to Unseen Crime Dossiers, where the stories the world tries to forget are finally uncovered. Stay with us, because every case you'll see is shocking, true, and you won't want to miss a single detail. Jennifer Bellony was a 28-year-old woman living in Brockton at the time of her death in 2014. She was a mother and a working adult who handled daily responsibilities inside and outside her home. Public records and court documents describe her as someone focused on maintaining stability for her children. She was not a public figure, and before the incident, her name was not widely known outside her local community. Her life followed a routine structure centered on family, work, and home management. She lived in a residential apartment building in Brockton and maintained regular contact with relatives and close acquaintances. Jennifer's early life was shaped by family structure and community connections. She had Haitian roots and was part of a cultural background that valued family involvement and support systems. Individuals who knew her stated that she prioritized parenting duties and structured her time around childcare. Her daily schedule typically included work commitments, household tasks, and time spent with her children. There is no public indication that she sought public attention or engaged in high-profile activities. Her lifestyle reflected that of many young parents balancing employment and family obligations in a mid-sized Massachusetts city. At the time leading up to the incident, Jennifer was married, though court proceedings later clarified that the relationship had ongoing problems. Legal filings referenced domestic conflict within the marriage. Reports introduced during trial described tension inside the household environment prior to the fatal event. These issues were not widely publicized before her death, but later testimony outlined disagreements and strain between the couple. Such conflicts were presented as part of the broader timeline investigators examined when reconstructing the events that led to her death. Her residential setting was a standard apartment unit within Brockton. The building itself was not previously associated with violent crime in media coverage before this case gained attention. Jennifer carried out daily activities inside that space, including caring for her children and managing domestic responsibilities. Neighbors later provided statements to law enforcement, offering information about sounds, movement, or observations connected to the time frame of the incident. These witness accounts became part of the investigative record, helping authorities form a clearer picture of her final hours. From available documentation, Jennifer did not have a criminal record. There were no reports indicating involvement in unlawful activity. Her role in the case was solely that of the victim. During court proceedings, prosecutors focused on her pattern of daily life to establish context, including her parenting duties and work history. Establishing this background helped jurors understand her normal routine compared to the disruption that occurred on the day of her death. The prosecution also referenced previous domestic disturbances to outline the dynamics inside the home environment. Family members later spoke publicly about her character, describing her as responsible and attentive to her children. Statements emphasized her focus on providing structure and care. While personal opinions varied, official proceedings centered on factual details, such as timelines, communications, and physical evidence rather than emotional portrayals. Media coverage consistently identified her as a young mother whose life ended inside her own residence. That identification shaped public understanding of the case and influenced broader discussions regarding domestic violence awareness. Understanding Jennifer Bellony's background is necessary to follow the full case narrative. She was a working parent residing in Brockton, managing routine responsibilities within a private household. Her marriage had documented tension prior to the fatal incident. She maintained connections to family and community while living a largely private life. When investigators later examined the circumstances of her death, they relied on these background details to evaluate motive, opportunity, and relationship history. Her identity as a mother and resident of Brockton remained central throughout court proceedings, forming the foundation for how the case was presented to the public and to the jury. Jennifer Bellony's relationship and home life became a central focus during the investigation that followed her death in Brockton. At the time, she was married and living in an apartment where she managed daily responsibilities related to parenting, household structure, and routine activities. Court records later indicated that the marriage was not stable in the period leading up to the incident. The household environment included ongoing disagreements that were described as private and largely contained within the home. These conflicts were not widely documented in public spaces before the case gained attention, but they were later presented as relevant background information during legal proceedings. Reports introduced during the trial suggested that the relationship had experienced repeated tension over time. Investigators reviewed the history of communication between the couple to better understand the domestic situation. This included looking into past interactions, behavioral patterns, and any reported disturbances within the residence. Authorities focused on whether arguments or disagreements had escalated prior to the fatal event. The examination of relationship history is a standard investigative step in domestic homicide cases, especially when the incident occurs inside a shared living space. Inside the home, Jennifer's daily life followed a structured pattern centered on childcare and household management. She spent significant time within the apartment, carrying out responsibilities associated with parenting and maintaining the living environment. Testimonies later described the residence as the primary location where most interactions between the couple occurred. Because of this, investigators concentrated on events that took place within that domestic setting. The apartment itself became a key location for evidence collection, timeline reconstruction, and forensic analysis. Witness statements collected during the investigation provided additional context about the household dynamics. Neighbors and nearby residents offered observations related to sounds, movements, and general activity within the building. These accounts were used to support or clarify the timeline developed by law enforcement. While no continuous public disturbances were widely reported before the incident, the investigation still evaluated whether any earlier signs of conflict had gone unnoticed. Establishing a pattern of behavior inside the home helped investigators determine how the domestic environment functioned prior to the crime. Legal documents later referenced the couple's marital strain as part of the broader case narrative. Prosecutors presented information suggesting that unresolved disputes existed within the relationship. This information was not used to create assumptions, but to provide factual context for the court. Relationship history often plays a role in understanding motive and opportunity, particularly when an incident occurs in a private residence with limited external witnesses. The prosecution and defense both examined the nature of the marriage to support their respective arguments during trial proceedings. The home environment also reflected a level of privacy that limited outside awareness of internal conflicts. Like many domestic situations, issues within the relationship were not openly visible to the public. This privacy meant that most interactions between Jennifer and her spouse occurred without external oversight. Investigators later relied on digital records, witness testimony, and physical evidence to reconstruct what life inside the apartment may have been like during the weeks leading up to the incident. This approach allowed authorities to build a clearer understanding of the household structure and interpersonal dynamics. Overall, Jennifer Bellony's relationship and home life were characterized by routine domestic responsibilities combined with documented marital tension that emerged during the investigation. The residence served as both her primary living space and the central location examined in the case. By analyzing communication history, witness observations, and the structured daily life within the home, investigators were able to contextualize the domestic setting in which the crime occurred. This detailed examination of her relationship and household environment became a foundational element in explaining the sequence of events reviewed in court and presented to the jury. On a day in September 2014, events unfolded inside an apartment in Brockton that would later become the center of a homicide investigation. According to official reports, the situation did not begin as a public emergency. Activities inside the residence appeared routine from an outside perspective. There were no immediate public alerts or large disturbances recorded in the early part of the day. However, as time passed, concern grew when Jennifer Bellony was no longer responding to expected communication. This shift from normal daily activity to sudden silence became one of the earliest indicators that something unusual had occurred inside the home. Authorities were eventually contacted after the lack of response raised concern among individuals connected to her. Law enforcement officers were dispatched to the apartment to conduct a welfare check. Upon arrival, they followed standard entry procedures and accessed the residence. Inside the unit, officers located Jennifer Bellony unresponsive. The condition of the scene immediately required further examination. Emergency personnel assessed the situation, and a location was secured for investigative processing. From that moment, the case transitioned from a welfare concern to a suspected homicide investigation. Investigators began documenting the environment within the apartment as part of the initial response. This included recording the physical layout of the residence, the placement of objects, and any visible signs that could help reconstruct recent activity. The apartment was treated as a primary crime scene, meaning that movement within the space was restricted and controlled. Forensic teams conducted systematic observations to identify potential evidence. Every detail, including entry points, room conditions, and personal items, was evaluated to determine whether they aligned with normal daily use or suggested a recent struggle. Timeline reconstruction became a critical focus during the early phase of the investigation. Authorities worked to establish Jennifer's last known movements and interactions before she was found. This process involved reviewing phone activity, communication records, and witness accounts from individuals who may have interacted with her in the hours leading up to the discovery. Investigators also analyzed the estimated time frame between her last confirmed contact and the moment officers arrived at the residence. Establishing this sequence helped narrow the window in which the incident likely occurred. During scene processing, investigators assessed whether there were signs of forced entry or external intrusion. Reports indicated that attention quickly shifted toward individuals who had direct access to the home. In cases where an incident occurs inside a private residence, law enforcement typically examines people within the victim's immediate circle first. This approach is based on statistical investigative practices rather than assumptions. Officers evaluated who had been present in the apartment and who had recent interaction with Jennifer prior to the discovery. Forensic examination extended beyond visual observation and included collection of physical evidence. Items within the apartment were documented, photographed, and, where relevant, secured for laboratory analysis. Investigators also evaluated environmental factors, such as the condition of doors, windows, and interior spaces. These steps were necessary to determine whether the events inside the residence aligned with a domestic conflict scenario or another form of incident. Each piece of collected evidence contributed to building a clearer understanding of what took place during the final hours inside the apartment. As the investigation continued throughout the day, Law enforcement coordinated interviews and gathered statements from individuals connected to Jennifer Bellony. The information collected was compared against physical findings from the scene to verify consistency. This structured process allowed authorities to transition from initial discovery to a focused criminal investigation. The day of the incident ultimately marked the beginning of a detailed inquiry into the circumstances surrounding her death, with the apartment in Brockton serving as a central location for evidence analysis, timeline reconstruction, and investigative decision-making. After the discovery inside the apartment in Brockton, law enforcement formally opened a homicide investigation and began following standard investigative procedures. The residence was secured as an active crime scene, and access to the location was limited to authorized personnel only. Investigators documented the interior environment through photographs, written reports, and scene diagrams. This careful documentation helped preserve the original condition of the apartment before any items were moved or collected for analysis. Each room was examined in a structured order to ensure that no physical detail was overlooked during the early stages of the inquiry. Forensic specialists were brought in to process the scene and collect evidence that could explain the sequence of events. This included examining surfaces, personal belongings, and areas where physical contact may have occurred. Evidence collection involved packaging items using proper chain of custody procedures so that all materials could later be reviewed in a laboratory setting. Investigators also searched for trace evidence, such as fibers, fingerprints, and other microscopic indicators that could connect individuals to specific locations within the residence. The goal of this step was to gather objective data rather than rely on assumptions. At the same time, detectives began constructing a detailed timeline of Jennifer Bellony's final known activities. They reviewed phone records, text messages, and call logs to determine who had communicated with her shortly before the incident. Digital records were analyzed alongside witness statements to identify any gaps or inconsistencies in reported events. Establishing an accurate timeline allowed investigators to narrow the possible window in which the incident occurred. This chronological framework became a central reference point for all later investigative decisions. Interviews were conducted with individuals who had direct or indirect contact with Jennifer in the days leading up to her death. This included family members, neighbors, acquaintances, and anyone who had recently visited or spoken with her. Investigators asked structured questions designed to clarify daily routines, recent interactions, and any noticeable behavioral changes. Statements were documented and compared against physical evidence and digital records. When differences appeared between accounts, detectives reevaluated the information to determine which details could be verified through supporting evidence. Because the incident occurred inside a private residence, investigators focused closely on people who had authorized access to the apartment. This investigative direction is consistent with standard homicide case methodology, where immediate associates are examined first due to proximity and opportunity. Authorities reviewed relationship history, prior domestic disturbances, and any documented conflicts that could provide context for case. This step did not assume guilt, but helped establish investigative priorities based on logical access and timeline relevance. Laboratory analysis played a key role as collected evidence was submitted for forensic testing. Specialists evaluated physical materials to identify patterns, confirm contact points, and support or challenge witness statements. Results from forensic examinations were integrated into broader case file and used to refine the timeline reconstruction. Investigators also cross-referenced forensic findings with interview records and digital data to ensure consistency across all sources of information. This systematic comparison helped strengthen the accuracy of the investigative conclusions. As the investigation progressed, detectives compiled all findings into a comprehensive case report. This report included scene documentation, forensic results, interview summaries, and timeline analysis. The purpose of this compilation was to present a clear, evidence-based narrative of events leading up to Jennifer Bellony's death. Law enforcement then used this structured body of evidence to guide legal actions and determine the next procedural steps. The investigation phase remained focused on factual verification, methodical evidence review, and logical sequencing of events within the Brockton residence where the incident occurred. Following the investigative findings gathered in Brockton, law enforcement moved into the enforcement stage of the case, which focused on identifying a primary suspect based on collected evidence, timeline reconstruction, and witness accounts. Detectives reviewed forensic reports, interview records, and digital communication logs before making any formal legal decision. Once investigators concluded that the available evidence met the legal threshold for probable cause, an arrest was authorized. This step was not immediate, but occurred after a structured review of all investigative materials to ensure that the legal process followed procedural standards. The suspect in the case was Jennifer Bellony's husband, who had been part of the investigative focus due to his direct connection to the residence and relationship history. Authorities formally took him into custody and transported him for processing in accordance with standard criminal procedure. During processing, personal information, fingerprints, and official documentation were recorded. The arrest marked a transition from investigative analysis to judicial proceedings. From that point onward, the case entered the court system, where the legal process required formal presentation of evidence rather than investigative interpretation alone. After the arrest, prosecutors filed formal charges, which included murder and related criminal counts based on the evidence presented by investigators. Charging documents outlined the factual basis for the prosecution's claims, including the timeline of events, physical evidence collected from the residence, and supporting witness testimony. These documents were submitted to the court to initiate the formal legal case. The suspect was then scheduled for arraignment, which is the first court appearance where charges are read and legal rights are explained. During this stage, the court also addressed bail conditions and detention status. Pre-trial proceedings followed and involved multiple legal steps designed to prepare the case for trial. Attorneys from both the prosecution and defense reviewed discovery materials, which included forensic reports, investigative summaries, and interview transcripts. Motions were filed to address evidentiary matters, procedural concerns, and legal arguments regarding admissibility of specific pieces of evidence. The court evaluated these motions through hearings where both sides presented structured legal reasoning. This stage ensured that the trial would proceed based only on evidence deemed legally acceptable. During the trial phase, the prosecution presented its case by outlining the sequence of events leading to Jennifer Bellony's death and the evidence supporting their claims. This included forensic analysis, witness testimony, and expert interpretations related to the crime scene. The defense was given the opportunity to challenge the evidence, question witnesses, and present alternative explanations within the boundaries of the law. The trial process followed established courtroom procedures, including jury selection, opening statements, witness examination, cross-examination, and closing arguments. Each step was conducted under judicial supervision to maintain fairness and legal accuracy. The jury was tasked with evaluating the evidence presented in court and determining whether the prosecution had proven the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Jurors reviewed testimony, forensic findings, and documented timelines before reaching a verdict. Their decision was based solely on the evidence introduced during trial proceedings rather than public opinion or external information. This deliberation phase is a critical component of the legal system, as it ensures that verdicts are determined through structured legal evaluation rather than investigative assumption. After deliberation, the court issued a verdict that concluded the trial phase of the case. Following conviction, a sentencing hearing was conducted where the judge reviewed the legal guidelines associated with the charges. Sentencing decisions consider the severity of the offense, the evidence presented, and statutory legal standards. The final judgment resulted in a life sentence, formally closing the judicial process related to the homicide of Jennifer Bellony. This legal outcome marked the end of the arrest and trial sequence, transitioning the case from active litigation to recorded criminal judgment within the Massachusetts legal system. After the legal proceedings concluded in Brockton, the case entered a phase of public review and community discussion. Media outlets reported on the investigation, the arrest, and the court verdict, which brought wider attention to the circumstances surrounding the homicide. Coverage focused on factual elements, such as a timeline, relationship background, and courtroom findings rather than speculation. As information became publicly available through court records and news reports, the case was referenced in discussions about domestic-related crimes and investigative procedures. This shift from courtroom focus to public awareness allowed the case to be analyzed within a broader social context. Community conversations centered on how incidents that occur inside private residences often remain unnoticed until after a critical event takes place. Residents in the area discussed the importance of recognizing patterns of conflict and the limitations of external observation, when issues are contained within a household. Public dialogue also examined how neighbors, acquaintances, and extended family members may not always be aware of internal domestic situations. These discussions were grounded in the understanding that many domestic conflicts develop privately and do not always present visible warning signs to outsiders. Advocacy groups and public safety organizations reference the case when discussing domestic violence awareness and prevention strategies. Educational materials and public forums highlighted the need for early reporting of domestic disturbances and the availability of support resources for individuals experiencing household conflict. While the case itself remained a legal matter, it became part of broader awareness campaigns that focus on prevention, intervention, and community education. These discussions emphasize structured responses, such as reporting concerns, seeking mediation, and using available legal protections where necessary. The case also contributed to professional discussions among legal analysts and criminal justice observers. Analysts reviewed investigative methods, forensic procedures, and courtroom strategies used during the trial. This type of review is common in homicide cases, as it helps legal professionals evaluate how evidence presentation and investigative timelines influence judicial outcomes. Observers noted how the structured documentation of the crime scene, combined with witness testimony and forensic findings, played a role in shaping the court's understanding of the events. Such analysis remained focused on procedural learning rather than emotional interpretation. Public discourse further extended into conversations about the role of law enforcement in responding to welfare checks and domestic incidents. The initial response to concerns about Jennifer Bellony's lack of communication highlighted how welfare checks can become critical investigative entry points. Discussions in community forums and public safety panels examine how early intervention and timely reporting may influence case outcomes. These conversations were framed around improving response systems and ensuring that potential risks within domestic environments are addressed through proper channels. Media retrospectives revisited the case in the context of domestic homicide patterns, using it as an example of how relationship history can become a central factor in investigative direction. Journalists and commentators reference the structured legal process, from arrest through sentencing, to explain how evidence-based prosecution functions in domestic-related cases. This form of reporting contributed to public understanding of how the justice system handles crimes that occur within private living spaces. The focus remained on factual interpretation rather than emotional narrative. Over time, the case maintained relevance in discussions related to domestic safety awareness and criminal justice procedure. It continued to be cited in informational content addressing the risks associated with unresolved domestic conflict and the importance of structured legal intervention. The documented sequence of investigation, arrest, trial, and sentencing provided a clear case study for public education and professional analysis. As a result, the case impact extended beyond the courtroom, influencing community awareness, legal discussions, and ongoing conversations about prevention strategies within domestic environments. The case concludes with a documented sequence of events that began inside a private residence in Brockton and progressed through investigation, arrest, and judicial review. All available records show that the incident was examined through formal law enforcement procedures, forensic analysis, and structured courtroom evaluation. The legal outcome was determined based on evidence, witness testimony, and a reconstructed timeline presented during trial. This closing phase reflects how a domestic homicide case transitions from an isolated incident into a fully processed legal matter within the criminal justice system. From a factual standpoint, the case demonstrates how incidents occurring within a household are often reconstructed through physical evidence and documented interactions rather than public observation. The residence served as a central location for investigative review, and every stage of the inquiry relied on verifiable data collected from the scene and related records. Investigators focus on establishing consistency between forensic findings, digital communication history, and witness accounts to produce a clear and structured narrative of events. This systematic method ensured that conclusions were based on documented facts instead of assumptions. The judicial process that followed reinforced the role of procedural law in determining accountability. Court proceedings examined the relationship history, the circumstances surrounding the incident, and the supporting forensic evidence submitted by the prosecution. The defense was provided the opportunity to challenge the presented material within a legal framework, ensuring that the verdict resulted from balanced judicial examination. The sentencing phase marked a formal closure of the court's involvement, finalizing the legal responsibility associated with the case and placing it within official criminal records. In broader analytical terms, the case highlights how domestic-related crimes are often investigated through close examination of interpersonal dynamics and access to the residence where the incident occurred. When a crime scene is confined to a private living space, investigative emphasis naturally shifts toward individuals with direct proximity and established interaction with the victim. This investigative pattern is consistent with standard homicide procedures and allows authorities to prioritize evidence-based leads during the early stages of case development. Public documentation of the case continues to serve as a reference point for discussions related to domestic conflict, investigative methodology, and courtroom procedures. Analysts reviewing the case have noted the structured progression from welfare concern to criminal investigation, followed by formal prosecution and sentencing. Each phase followed established legal and forensic protocols, demonstrating how complex domestic incidents are handled within the justice system using step-by-step evidentiary evaluation. The consistency of procedural actions across all stages contributed to the clarity of the final legal conclusion. The case also illustrates the importance of detailed record-keeping and investigative documentation in ensuring judicial accuracy. Reports, forensic findings, and interview transcripts collectively form the evidentiary foundation presented during trial. By relying on structured documentation, the legal process maintained objectivity and avoided reliance on speculation or external narratives. This approach reflects the broader principles of criminal justice, where factual verification and procedural compliance guide the resolution of serious criminal cases. In conclusion, the case of Jennifer Bellony remains a documented example of how a domestic incident is examined through investigative diligence and legal structure from beginning to end. The sequence of discovery, evidence collection, suspect identification, trial proceedings, and sentencing forms a complete procedural framework that defines the resolution of the case. The final outcome represents the application of legal standards to a private residential crime, closing the case within the formal justice system while leaving a lasting record for public reference and institutional analysis. Here at Unseen Crime Dossiers, we're driven by a mission to uncover hidden realities, honor forgotten voices, and keep their memories alive. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, there's more coming that will challenge you even deeper. Make sure to hit subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a case. We're dropping new episodes regularly, and trust us, what's ahead is even more chilling. Before you go, we want to hear from you. What moment hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. Your perspective matters, and your voice helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, stay alert, stay informed, and never stop seeking the truth, because every life deserves to be heard. Thanks you all for watching.